Eyes in the dark.
This happened after I went to university, so I was about 18 years old. I made an effort to make friends after I moved onto campus, and ended up with a few groups of friends that I would hang out with, including a new girlfriend, and plenty of people from my classes that I liked well enough. There was one class before lunch where it was traditional for people to go to the cafeteria afterwards to eat in pairs or threes. I didn't really care about who I'd have lunch with, because I got along fine with most people from the class, and we were all trying to make an effort to be social. So when one girl, Lily, asked if I wanted to eat lunch together after that class, I didn't have any reason to say no. We talked about school and that kind of thing. Nothing noteworthy, but she did ask me to get lunch with her again the next week. It became a pattern, and there wasn't exactly a way to start saying no suddenly. It was fine, but it did mean that I lost the chance to eat with everyone else on those days. In hindsight, I suppose that was the point. One day in class, I asked someone if I could add them on social media. This happened right in front of Lily. I saw her face jerk towards me from a couple of seats over. It was such a sharp reaction that it was hard to ignore, and I still remember it. By the time I got home later that day, Lily had sent me a friend request. No friends in common. Don't know how she knew my last name. I was a bit surprised, but I guess that she just dug through the university's social media pages and found me through there. It gave me a bad feeling, but surely it was fine. She ended up messaging me a lot and commenting on everything that I posted. I told myself that she was just awkward, and we became friends, if not close. I'd known worse people anyways. She still always got me to go eat lunch with her after our one shared class. Other than that, we rarely spent time together in person. I saw her around sometimes, but I never went out of my way to go hang out with her. So it was mostly online messaging and seeing each other in group settings. Coincidentally, my girlfriend was also called Lily. This was something that clearly bothered Lily, not my girlfriend, who couldn't have found it less interesting. It is a common name. She occasionally hinted that she wanted my girlfriend to pick a different name, or joked about her not suiting it. She clearly didn't like my girlfriend at all, and I had an idea of why. It was hard to ignore by this point. Lily was starting to hint that she had a crush on me. I tried not to address it, because what was I going to say? I've never known what to do when a friend makes a pass at me. I was also not interested in the least. Even ignoring the weird stuff that she pulled, Lily was not my type at all. She tended to dress and act in a way somewhere between a 50s housewife and one of those adults who is still obsessed with Disney princesses, if you can picture that. Things took an uncomfortable turn on the day of our last shared class of the year. Instead of asking me to lunch like she usually does, Lily asked if I'd go for a walk with her. Again, I didn't exactly know how to refuse, so I said all right. Our campus was bordered by a large path of woodland. Lily led me into the woods, and the sounds of our fellow students slowly faded away. She sat down on a log, and I joined her. She started talking about how she was going to miss me over the summer. I tried placating her, but I didn't want to be there, especially because she seemed almost on the verge of tears. I think I tried to make an excuse about having plans with my girlfriend, but before I could leave, Lily chose to kiss me without warning. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. I got out of there and was happy to think that I wouldn't see her for a while. I came back to university after the summer, moving into a house with my friends. Without going off topic, there were some serious issues in my friend group. A lot of petty arguing, and worse. I broke up with my girlfriend around the start of that school year as well. And basically the whole mess made me recontextualize things with Lily, because it suddenly didn't seem as bad. That said, I didn't want to be alone with her. We mostly talked online. She was still constantly messaging me after all. One upside of everything was that I started dating a boy. Lily was not pleased to hear that news. I think she hoped to sneak in after I broke up with my girlfriend. But as I said before, that was never going to happen. There wasn't a big gap between my breakup and this new relationship, so she must have thought that she missed her chance to be with me. This is where the story gets pretty bad. At this time, I was fairly active on Tumblr. I occasionally talked about my life, and mostly reblogged photos and stuff. I was on there one day when something odd had happened. One of the blogs that I followed had received an ask with some phrases that I recognized. It took a second to register that it was taken from a My About page. That made me freeze. I read the message properly. Someone was asking this complete random person to analyze a section of text from my page, asking for their opinion on the type of person who would write it. I cannot stress how messed up it was to see people talking about me like I was a character in a book that they were trying to study. The reply was basically, "I don't know, I'm sorry," but the important thing was that the question hadn't been anonymous. It linked to someone's blog. Obviously, I wanted to know who had taken such a bizarre interest in me. As far as I knew, no one in real life, other than my boyfriend, knew about my page. Well, no prizes for guessing who was behind it. What I found was like a shrine. She was using a fake name, but I recognized Lily all over that thing. It was this cutesy, pink and red page. There were a few posts about her interest, but most of the content was focused on her primary interest, me. Most of the posts were about me. There were accounts of things that I've done recently. He told me about such and such. He went to a nightclub recently. Stuff like that. As well as references to things from as far back as I've known her. It was clear that she'd been keeping tabs on me, both online and offline, gathering up every scrap of information that she could about my life and hoarding it here in her collection. She talked about us eating lunch together and how special our dates had been to her, as if it was anything more than acquaintances getting food after class. She talked about the time that she had forcibly kissed me in the woods, but she wrote it as if I had been mutually interested. She quoted lyrics from my favorite song and talked about how she'd always been there for me, no matter who else came into my life. Lots of references to loving me just the way he is, which answered another mystery about an anonymous love letter I'd received earlier that year with the same wording. It got worse. There were a lot of posts about my boyfriend as well. These weren't so nice. They got vicious, talking about how he didn't deserve me. He didn't know what he had. If she was with me, she'd be jealous of anyone else who came near me. So my boyfriend not being a jealous person meant that he didn't love me. It was angry and hateful. I didn't like to think about the sort of person who would write so obviously being fixated on me. One thing that didn't make sense at first was that the blog also made plenty of references to Lily's best friend, Steven. She had never mentioned this person to me. Her posts talk a lot about Steven and how a great friend he was, and how much fun they had together, how he looked out for her. I was trying to work out whether this was an online friend, when one specific post made it all click. She had posted a photo and captured it with "Steven sent this to me." He knew that I would like it, and I love it, or something along those lines. The problem was, the photo was taken from my own page. I didn't send it to her. She took it from my page, and then claimed this fictional best friend of hers shared it with her, because in her head, she'd split me into two people. In her messed up fantasy life, I was both the perfect best friend who was always looking out for her, and her soulmate who was bound to end up with her when I finally got over my sweet and kind boyfriend, and all the other easy girls that I hung out with that made dozens of posts complaining about. Who was she complaining to? Oh, Lily had an audience. She asked open questions about me and her relationship with me, and got messages back from her followers, people who took what she said at face value. I saw a bunch of random people agreeing with the stalker that my boyfriend didn't deserve me, and we were bound to break up soon, so that I could be with Lily, the person I was clearly supposed to be with. She had this fake, fan fiction version of my life up for everyone to share their opinion on, and she'd made herself out to be the hero of it all. I went maybe a month back into this page's history. I did not look at everything that was there. It was just way too much, so I'm not sure how long this has been going on. I sent Lily a message confronting her about the blog. She said nothing, and I cannot stress how weird it was to have found pages and pages dedicated to me, with her talking about how she was in love with me and would make sure that we ended up together. Slamming my boyfriend and building a fantasy life with two different versions of me that she clearly believed to be real, then acting like it hadn't even happened. She said nothing. She didn't address it. She just changed the subject, even after I pushed. And it was like she hadn't even registered what I said. I've never seen anything else like it. She deleted the page, of course, or at least changed the name and hid it so that I never found it again. It wasn't the end, though. I wasn't going to hang out with her anymore, but we were still shoved together in classes, and she had started to actually scare me with what she might do next. I'm kind of a paranoid person. Knowing someone was obviously keeping track of me for who knows how long freaked me out. The next thing that she pulled was trying to seduce my boyfriend. It was an absolute useless attempt that only made him uncomfortable. He told me about it right away. What was her plan there? Did she hope to tell me that he cheated and wait for me to break up with him? Why would I want her after all that? When that didn't work out for her, she tried hitting on 3 of my other friends. None of them took the bait. She ended up dating one of my former housemates for a little while, but made sure to send me messages while they were together, letting me know she'd rather be with me. No thank you. Lily made sure to stay in my life the whole time that I was at university. There was a time when I tried to pull away from her, and she ended up starting rumors about me, and damaging a career opportunity that I put a lot of work into. I didn't know what else that she did behind my back, but it made me realize it was safer to let her think that she was part of my life while ignoring her, rather than doing something that would cause her to get angry. After I graduated, Lily still wanted to spend time together, but I knew that I didn't have to now. I made excuses about work, and barely talked to her after that point. I almost entirely stopped posting on social media that I knew she knew about. Of course, she didn't give up that easily. She tried to start conversations, asked me to go meet up with her, attempts that I usually ignored. I didn't like to think that she was still tracking me online, but she probably was. I don't know how, but she'd occasionally reference things that I mentioned online somewhere she shouldn't have known about. The last time we had a real conversation, she sent me a message out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken at all in months, and we hadn't talked about anything serious in much longer than that. Thinking about that conversation still makes my skin crawl, but I'll summarize what happened. At first, she asked me some questions about how long I had known I was a queer. I told her some basic stuff, the kind of thing that I'd tell anyone who asked. Then she changed the subject. She started talking about how would I feel about her if she was a boy, about wanting to be a boy for me. The messages quickly became like a fetish. She went into plenty of detail about fantasies that she had of the 2 of us. Again, we were not friends at all at this point. We'd never been especially close, at least not from my perspective, and we'd barely spoken for years. I can't imagine sending messages like that to even a close friend, let alone someone who barely knows you. I tried telling her not to pull this crap with me, but she decided to change tactics. She sent photos of herself, followed by a bunch of messages. Maybe 4 or 5 a minute, way too fast for me to reply before the next one arrived, basically quoting back what I've told her about myself and my past earlier. She'd been telling me these things as if they had happened to her. She was role-playing as me. The worst part was that she seemed to believe that it was real, that these things actually happened to her. Even when she was quoting me word for word. Things that I told her only hours before were now her life. It was like she was trying to absorb my history, to take it over, to make my life part of her. Yeah, I didn't talk to her again after that. I ignored future attempts that she made to talk to me, and I eventually silently deleted her from the inactive social media which was her only real way of contacting me. I really thought she might finally move on. A few days ago, she sent me a friend request. It's sitting there unanswered, because I know if I delete it, she'll only send another one. Lily and I met nearly 12 years ago. This history is just the highlights, and even then, it's only the stuff that I know about for sure. A lot has happened behind my back. I know it did. So girl who spent 12 years obsessing over me, fetishizing over me, stalking me, and harassing me, I really don't want to see you again. The fantasy life that you built for the 2 of us in your head is the only place that you'll be seeing me anytime soon. My sister Penny was always afraid of the upstairs at our house. She never went up there at night. Our main conversation every night went something like this. Buffy, go upstairs and find me my white sweater, black jeans, and leather jacket. The clothing items would change from night to night, but I was always asked to go get her things. But she would not go up without an adult after dark. Why can't you go up and get them? Because something is up there. I sleep up there. Nothing has happened to me. Just wait. Someday it will. Okay, I'll admit that it's creepy as hell up there. I'll give you the layout. There are 2 rooms that lead into each other. No hallway. And there is an attic above, and 1 on each side. The house is well over 100 years old, and there's a banister over the stairs that is closed off by a door. I remember Penny coming home from dates, and before she would take her boyfriend upstairs, she would send him up with a flashlight to check the closets and under the beds, even though I was in one of those beds. Once when our mother asked her why she would not sleep upstairs in her room, she rattled off numerous reasons. You can see small lights come out of the closet, and you could hear footsteps and heavy breathing in the attic. There is always a sense of being watched a little too closely. That is ridiculous. I've never seen anything or heard anything, I told her. You should stop letting her sleep on the couch every night. Mom replies, she's okay. She can sleep where she wants. She's not hurting anything. I think my mom knew, but since nothing was bothering me at the time, she overlooked it. Better to have 1 daughter on the couch than 2. I even took the problem to my dad, being as he is always on my side. Mom seemed that she was always on Penny's side. Eventually my sister got married and moved out when she was 18, and I was 11. Then I guess the ghost or whatever thought it was my turn. So here's my experience. In the attic I could hear stomping, and it was not in just one attic, it was all 3 of ours. They were whispering in the closet, like 2 children having a conversation. The conversations that I overheard were from talking about dolls or something. They were trying to figure out what happened to someone named Uncle Doffy, and sometimes it sounded as if they were discussing how they would run away. I did not get a bad feeling from the girls in the closet. I was always being watched all day and all night, and lived in a constant state of panic. When I was upstairs, every nerve was on edge. The worst thing was this big black shadow in the middle of the night asking where Penny was. The voice wasn't the voice of a kid. It sounded like it came from someone who smoked 4 packs a day for 50 years. The black shadow asked after my sister 6 times every single night. When I would not answer out of fear, the shadow would throw things at me. Books, figurines, even pictures. Then it was my turn to sleep on the couch, and then I understood my sister. It wasn't an excuse. She actually heard these things. I never understood why I didn't until after Penny moved out, and I was bullied by this ghost, or whatever it was. That's what the entity was, a bully, something that always had to have power over us, the young, powerless sisters that lived in the house. Fast forward 2 years after Penny was gone, she had her own home. My oldest sister, Jenny, couldn't afford the house that she was renting due to being in the middle of a divorce, brought her 3 kids, and moved in with us. Jennifer, which was 5, Kevin, who was 3, and Amanda, who was 2, which meant Jennifer would be staying with me, and we were both expected to sleep upstairs. We were all woken up all the time by stomping, and when Jennifer would start to cry from being scared, I would tell it was her, because the house was old. And that's what old homes did. They settled at night. Exactly what my mom always told me when I heard odd noises in our home. Jennifer's 6th birthday rolls around, and my mother buys her one of those creepy clown dolls. You know, the ones with a plastic head, a wire body under its clown clothing, and has the most insanely evil laughter. That clown was always going off by itself at night, never during the day. One night I decided that I had enough, so I go out of bed and went over to take the batteries out. But when I opened up the battery pack, there were no batteries inside. I told my mom and older sister, but no one cared, or they thought it was an overactive imagination. Penny believed me. So the next day I got up, threw it in the attic, but it would still go off, every night in the middle of the night. Then one day I came home, and the doll was out of the attic, and sitting on the chair across from my bed. When I asked who put that there, no one knew. We ended up burning that doll. Penny came and burned sage in our home. Now that I'm a grown-up, my kids who like to stay with my mom always tell me about their things being moved and their chargers being jerked from the wall. But I still feel that it waits to this day for Penny to come home. Maybe because she feared it the most. I really don't know. But I know that that bully brought me a lot closer to my sister, whom I couldn't possibly live without now. When I was younger, I'd go visit my grandparents all the time. They lived in a one-floor house with an unfinished basement. I never liked it down there. It felt too small for a big basement. There was a little door down there that was for storage, and I always got a horrible feeling when being close to it. And let me add that this was a newer house that was about 6 years old. Now, during the time that I was about 6 or 7, I felt so uncomfortable going down there, even when I was with somebody. I didn't like it at all. I remember going down there with my grandmother to help with something. She had to run upstairs because someone rang the doorbell. She said that she would be right back, even though she knew how I felt about being alone down there. But I nodded and told her okay. She was gone, and I was alone. I started to get a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't move, and didn't want to, even though the lights were on. Now this is where everything started happening, and it still gives me chills. The lights started to flicker, and I started to hear noises, and what sounded like talking. It was not coming from upstairs, but in that storage room. I heard someone say my name. Here is the part that freaks me out the most. The voice sounded like my grandmother. I was confused as hell. How am I hearing her when she is upstairs? I didn't want to move, but being the curious one, I started moving towards the storage room door. The closer that I got, the worse the bad feeling came. When I got to the door, the lights turned off in the basement. I wanted to run upstairs and hide. Go home, anywhere that wasn't that basement. I heard my name again for the second time. My grandmother's voice asking me to open the door to help her. So I did, and I regret it. I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black. I couldn't hear anything but faint laughing that felt like forever. But when the laughing stopped and the lights turned back on in the basement, I felt a little bit better with the lights back on. But the downside, I could see a little bit into the storage room. I saw a small clown doll in the storage room, and my grandmother hates clowns with a passion and wants nothing to do with them. So why is there a clown doll? I have no damn idea. Then the lights turn on in the storage room. I saw red that looked like blood all over the place. I screamed and blacked out. The next thing I knew, I was laying on the couch. My grandmother looking at me and asking if I was okay. I have no idea if that was real or a dream, but it sure as hell felt real.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.